Hey, good morning, everybody. I think I'm gonna mess it up. Sorry, I've had more technology issues this morning, I'm telling you. Nikki Burnett here. Today is Taste Life Nutrition Radio podcast streaming live on KUHSdenver.com. Today I have Christa Biegler, RD, registered dietitian. Yes. Like, make sure I got my notes right. And a specialist in the world of eczema. We've not talked much about eczema, but that's a problem because eczema is everywhere. We see it in kids, we see it in adults, we see it all over the place. And I'm sorry, I'm hiding your face again. And so I think this is going to be a really great conversation because there's a ton of confusion about eczema, about what it is, about what causes it, about what we can do about it. I think there's a lot of times a feeling that we can't do anything about it and we just got to deal with it, right? And that's not good either. So thanks for being here. I'm excited about our talk.
Yeah, thank you for having me. I think that anytime we can shed a little more light into something that has a little bit of muckiness around it is a good thing. I always think know better, do better.
Yeah, I love it. Absolutely. So true. Okay, so first, as always though, we start the show with gratitude. Gratitude can change the world. It's a beautiful day outside. I know I'm super grateful for that. What are you grateful for?
I'm honestly grateful for snow. I'm grateful that I had time to work out this morning. I'm grateful for the breakfast I sat down and had with my husband and my kiddo this morning. I think I love finding gratitude in the simple, small joys. And I think that we all have I know that we all have a negativity bias, right? Where it's easy to only focus on what's not going right. And so everything that I could look at that's not going right, I try to flip it, right? Because that's what's informing literally my immune system, right? So when I had, for example, I'll use this example, it's at the top of my head, like when I had mice in our Airbnb a couple of weeks ago, I first freaked out and then I was like, okay, high quality problems. And I have people help me. I have people to help me. And my guests are not angry. And I'm like freaking out about it. But, so all of those things. So that's a bit of a tangent on gratitude. But it matters so much how we think about something. We have to constantly rein in our brain and how we think about things to control the life we want to live.
Seems like we're going to talk a lot about this.
Very well, it could be. Who knows? It can go anywhere.
Yeah, it's the truth. So, there's the intentionality behind it, right? And it's I think just like anything else, it's a practice. It's a practice, yes, the gratitude piece of it, but the practice of not going backwards and into the negative. And I know, it's sort of... similarly, I grew up with, and I say this a lot, and it's not a bad thing. Anyway, my sweet mom was always so negative on herself. She's amazing.
So common.
Yes. Such an amazing, God-fearing blessing to this world, but had such a bad habit. I know she did it outwardly, which means how often did she do it inwardly? But, I know that from that modeling, I would do the same thing. And so now I'm much more aware. I still do it. And then I'm like, that's not true. Because, it's the whole, well, why'd you do that? That was stupid. I'm like, that's not true. I'm not stupid.
Right? Yeah. That's Byron Katie's work almost in somewhat of what you're describing. She always says there's 4 important questions and 2, I don't know the other 2, but 2 of them are, is it true? Is it really true? And it's just like what you said, Nikki. Is that true? No, it's not true. That's not true.
So I love this, and I love the way that this is starting out because I think that this is a component to, being that we're in the nutrition world, right? People are like, oh, so you tell people how to eat. Sure, yes, there's an important component to the healthy food that we're putting into our body or lack thereof. But there's so much more, which is why I love what you're going to talk about. Because I think we'll hit the gamut of all of the things that are important to eczema specifically, and which also then will branch out to many other things. But making sure, and I try to do this a lot, but making sure that we are hitting this mental, emotional, nervous system component to whatever we're struggling with, I think is so key to what we're struggling with, right? We have to have it's not connected. Everything's so connected.
Yeah, I talk about this from the perspective of a health triad, and I don't know if I made this up or found it somewhere once upon a time, but I think that it's common for someone to say, oh, I'm overwhelmed by all of the options. And speaking of gratitude, you know, that is a choice of, oh, there are so many options, that is awesome, or there are so many options, that is overwhelming. But the health triad makes things less overwhelming because it sort of buckets things into three corners, if you imagine a triangle. So we've got our, just exactly what you said, we've got the nutritional chemical angle of what's going on, like the biochemistry angle of what's going on, which is where you and I really started all of our work. But the more you work with humans, you realize, oh, there's more to this, right? There's, people may think that this is a nutrition question, but really how you're eating very much has such a emotional, energetic, nervous system component completely. For example, if you feel like you can't stop eating when you're in front of food, that has less to do with the food and more to do with your nervous system, what's going on behind it. And then the final corner is the structural or environmental. So if we're talking about the lens of skin rashes, I'll just use an example from our topic today. A lot of people will go in, they will think that the nutritional chemical is just let me restrict food or that there's food triggers. I really like to challenge that. And then the structural and environmental part, I'm a questioner. The structural and environmental part might be, what have you done both topically for skin integrity? What have you done environmentally around removing some of the toxic burden? So that also goes back to the chemical component of the physiology and the biochemistry of the body. So there's all of that. And then the last little corner or segment at the top, which would be the emotional energetic, is really, speaking of gratitude, our emotions inform our immune system. So everything is, I suppose maybe it should be a circle, but all of that entire triad is really cyclical overall. And so I think sometimes people say, I've tried a lot of things, and I often find that we've tried a lot of things in a certain corner. It's typically that structural and environmental with this particular condition or set of conditions, skin rashes, because there's lots of ways we could talk about it. But we could do that for any kind of diagnosis, any kind of symptom. We could put it through that lens of, oh, what are the options in each one of those corners?
Yeah, absolutely. And I love that. And it's so true. And we can't just, we can't play in one corner, right? It really is, everything is connected. And
otherwise you end up with relapse, I think, honestly, faster and easier, which is something no one really talks about, in my opinion, but it's a very important it's something I'm pretty interested in general, is like relapse prevention.
Awesome. Love that. We'll dig into that. Let's do this first. Just because I think it's one of the things that I love about the show, right, is everybody has a story. Everybody I have brought on is an entrepreneur, and they're where they are because there's a story behind it, and it's brought them to where they are, right? And it's brought them to this place of service and of love, and that's what this show is. It is of service and of love. And so I would love to hear a little bit about your story, because I know you describe it as sort of that perfect storm, and we see that a lot. Everybody, there are those who are like,
typical.
Yeah, and you feel like everything has just gone completely wonky and haywire, but it's been heading that way for a while.
Oh yeah, for sure.
Yeah.
My story began, if we're talking about the skin story, of course, that's what we're talking about.
Whatever story you want.
I have like 3 different health crises, because that's sometimes you learn, you get through a couple of layers. But the first one was really a skin rash story, and so in short, from probably high school on, I would have told you that I have dry skin and it would appear in my hairline in the winter. And I thought that it was genetic because my sisters had it. I now know better, but it was sort of not really interfering with my life, or I didn't know any different at that time. Fast forward to adulthood. So I talked about how it just presented a little bit in the winter, not so much in the summer. And there's a lot to be said about how it presents overall, like what your skin, like what are the messages communicating related to that physiology, that biochemistry. But fast forward, the real sort of crisis happened. It was summer. I had 2 toddlers. I was switching careers, and I was taking my kids to the swimming pool every day for a week for swimming lessons. And so I was exposed to that chlorine, which has a little bit of a side story as well. And one day I woke up, and this is what I remember about it, but the reason I gave that other little bit is there was probably things building for a while, right?
Sure.
And so, and I know that there was little things. There are some things that are easier to hide. when your gut isn't quite feeling right, and that may look, honestly, there's so many things that we just sweep under the rug, like not waking up with energy, not having good energy throughout the day. Of course that was going on, but that gets sort of swept under the rug as you've got 2 toddlers, etc. There's a lot built into that. What happens is when our visual appearance changes, we start to take action really fast. It's a very common thing for humans. And so I woke up one morning, is how I remembered it, because it was about 2014, 15, something like that. And I woke up with a rash kind of all over my face and my neck, my eyes, etc. And it was like red and painful. Like it was quite severe. And I'd never had anything quite like that, right? So it was sort of this perfect storm of probably multiple things. And so unraveling it, unwinding it, really took longer than I would have liked. I learned a lot of lessons along the way. I did what most normal humans would be, which was just try to find someone else who could take care of it for me and do the work for me, right? As we do. Very often we look for someone to just like fix us.
Just fix it.
And we miss out on the lessons, and we get to continue to learn those lessons. And so very often, whether we like it or not, which is why when I'm working with clients specifically, it's like, I know that this is what you think, but I want to make sure you have these other skills by the time you're done also, because feeling like you have to rely on someone for the rest of your life, you eventually learn, if you end up in a relationship like that, a codependent relationship like that, is really disempowering. Right? It's super disempowering. And when we live in a place of disempowerment, we are often shitting all over ourselves, like your mom's story, right? Or we're like, there's all these things that go together, right? So it's a whole life shift and change very often. Our physical health really likes to show off for us sometimes when we need to work on some other things. So the short of it is I saw a lot of different people. I have a lot of stories from that. I saw a famous gut health practitioner online who did tell me I could do nothing. That was fun. Which I know people have heard that before, right? He had done a couple of different tests and it's like, well, you could do nothing because there's not really anything here. And I think that part of that story is kind of important, right? It made me a little bit more skeptical of things I later saw in practice, that tests are not, I think people come in with this opinion that tests are going to tell them everything, and they don't always tell you everything. Your lived experience is more important than a test. I'm not saying testing cannot or isn't important, and I would certainly do it if we wanted to do it or needed to do it, or if it changed what we were going to do about something. But I would say it's like a 50-50 shot on testing. We just think that it's going to solve all of our problems. Like our brain thinks a lot of things. Speaking of that gratitude, it thinks a lot of things. It thinks someone else can fix this. I don't have to do anything about it. The test will give me all the answers if I just restrict this or this or this. So it was a little bit of an experience. What I eventually learned trying to work with different people was like, people didn't really know much about clearing. Like it was a very shallow, generic toolbox of the same things, like an omega or a probiotic or zinc, or just like very generic. And I really had to dig into the research and become kind of a guinea pig on myself. And to be honest, when I crawled out of that hole, I really didn't want to have to deal with it anymore because I didn't enjoy that, right? But people I did a presentation for a group of moms about skin issues, and then a couple of moms said, would you help me with my kid? And then the rest is history. Like I didn't advertise for skin issues for years, and people just always came for that all the time because they probably had a similar experience as me. Oh wow, I'm really having trouble finding someone who knows anything about this, right? And there is something, the nice thing, the thing I'm grateful for now, and I did have this is a fleeting grateful thought throughout that process, was that when you've experienced something, you understand it completely differently, right? And so you are able to have sort of this empathy or this understanding that maybe someone who hasn't had that does have.
Yeah, I totally agree, and I talk about that a lot because having the lived experience and then the shared experience, it does bring a level of understanding and empathy and connection, and I think it's an important piece of it. But that's why so many of us are doing what we do, is because of our story and because of the hard shit that we had to go through, and because we did take it and we dug in as deeply as we could. Because then you're like, okay, I'm out of this, or still coming out of it, right? There are times we still have to manage and make sure we're doing all of the things. But you're like, I now know what I can do for others who are struggling too, like it or not, right? It's just
like it or not.
And that's part of the gratitude, because I think being grateful for the hard stuff, that's the stuff that helps us to grow. That's the stuff that makes us who we are, and it gives us the ability to serve others, just like we were talking about earlier.
Well, and we don't learn things from the easy stuff.
No,
and the other thing
never.
that we sort of have to regard as true, or at least like in the, I will call it the coaching world, is like life is 50-50. It is not all mountaintops. It is not. It is low. And the lows help you appreciate the highs, and they're just part of it. They're just part of it. And so, your own management of yourself around those lows does massively impact the rest of it as well.
Yeah. I'm curious about a couple of things, and we'll start kind of digging into some of the nerdy sciencey stuff. But for you, I think that there are a lot of untruths. There are a lot of like misconceptions. There are a lot of and the part of what I'm going at, because I say this a lot, is I want people to learn how to partner with their body as opposed to fighting their body, right?
It's a rarity, really.
It is. And I know that you see it and I see it, because when people come to us, it's like this, everything has just gone haywire and you don't know what to do, and you're like, my body hates me, my body's in pain, the food doesn't like me, food doesn't agree with me, I'm itching, I've got a rash, all of these things. Why does my body hate me? I don't want to do this anymore. Instead of turning it, because all of the body, the ultimate goal of the body is to keep us alive, right?
Yeah.
And so what's it going to do?
And it does a really good job of it.
It's amazing, even when we're fighting it, right? It's amazing. And so taking that, though, and flipping it, going, okay, what am I supposed to hear in this moment? What am I supposed to learn from my body? Because that's what all it's trying to do, is tell us, like, hey, I'm at a point now where I need your input on this. I need you to start paying attention and doing something. So all of that to be said is sort of, what is your experience in kind of figuring that piece of it out? And then the things that you tried that were like, well, that didn't work and that didn't work, and as you're sort of learning through your situation. Oh, one more thing, because I don't want to forget, I'm curious about the chlorine, because you sort of hit on the chlorine.
Yeah, I wonder if I should table the chlorine and come back to it, because it's sort of a random tangent about halogens. And so, and I don't know if that's really helpful to the audience, but I think I want to frame this up in a way that is, you were starting to talk about it. My entire shtick at this moment, and kind of the hill I'm ready to die on now, is that all of your symptoms are signals. And so if you start to decipher and decode those signals, that will take some skill building. And so it's not like you just snap your fingers and you understand it 100% and you're good to go. But it doesn't have to take a super long time. Like, you can have a really good handle on this skill in a few months, really. You can continue to build it, but when you do that, you are now in control and you now know what to do. And so I want to make sure I'm framing this well in service to the audience, in that, so for example, I think a really tangible things are very important. And so very tangibly, I typed or subtyped what kind of signals I was seeing from skin issues that pointed to what you should actually do first. And when you're doing things out of order, or when you're doing like sort of random things, and so when I mean out of order, I mean, for example, because I think I've got a handful of examples. First of all, I'll just tell you the real answer. The real answer, which you're gonna, like, you may hate, is like, it's assessment. So we'll talk about that next. It's like, if you assess that and then you type it, and then you can start in the right place, essentially. But some things that can happen, and this happens a lot, especially for people who don't really know about skin, or like a provider may accidentally do this. If you overstimulate the natural detoxification processes, the skin is a very safe place for your body to put trash. Like, what are our organs of elimination? They're the colon, the liver, the skin, the lungs for respiration, the skin for the sweating, right? The colon for the bowel movements, the kidneys for the urine, the liver to like package up toxins, especially using bile. And so if that gets congested, which by the way doesn't really show up very well on lab results, I want to make that really clear. Like your symptoms are more valuable and they're going to be subtle. I know if I'm not waking up very well, like, and I don't have very good energy, that area is like, I've learned that signal from my body because I've learned the response of when I support things. I know that that's like, things are slowing down. I could improve my burden load. And so when you are kind of pushing too hard on that, or you sort of do things out of order, which is like to overdo stimulating detox, and what does that maybe look like? It may or may not look like lots of things, but something like humans do is they might Google something and they go take a bunch of milk thistle, which is farther up this, there's a whole lot of nuance to that biochemistry, but it's very possible if you kind of overdo this, you'll make everything a lot worse. And because of some of the causes of skin issues, we can even end up with an infection. And you're actually never going to heal it from the inside out if you have an infection. It's like your house is burning down and you're trying to like paint the walls. It just doesn't work. You have to fix the infection first. And so these are like things that have become so blatantly obvious to me from working with skin issues that it's like, I get it. But the point is, when you do things out of order, it can be a little bit frustrating. And so the type of skin, the type of eczema, the type of rash, the type of atopic dermatitis, the different particular symptoms or signals that it is sending by how it presents and how it acts can tell you a lot about what your first focus is overall. So I can type those. But another thing that may or may not, I don't know if this is, but I want to talk about it because the natural, normal thing I see, because I have a really health conscious population, and most likely those are the people listening to your show anyway, because people tend to seek out health things when they're already interested in health, and so whether we like it or not, it's just how it is. And so when you have a health conscious person, they usually, I think, typically really value like whole healthy foods, etc. And what is a tricky, sneaky, frustrating thing is that very often people will restrict their diet and see their skin improve, but then unfortunately they will either continue to restrict it or they will be like, I'm just sort of stuck this way. And really it's like, I have to ask, I think like asking some questions. If you are in that position and you're experiencing that, I want to ask you, like, have you always reacted negatively to this food, or did it happen later in life? Because if it happened later in life, there's something going on with your physiology that's making you not really handle the food downstream. It's not really the food's fault. It's really creating, it's really like for lack of a better word, like feeding the fire of what's going on the inside overall. So that is a tricky, sneaky, unfortunate fallout that happens a lot with skin issues. I find is people, I love this one story about this client who's she's just busy mom, like every mom, right? And she is trying to work and have her kids at home. I don't know what's all these things. Like she's overwhelmed in short. Sure. And most moms that walk in the door have that level of overwhelm. But she was literally grinding her own flour when she came to me. And that's fine if that's what you want to do. But she did not want to or have the capacity, and she was resenting this. And so I just remember it's just like such a pointed memory for me where she's like, oh, no, I'll have to grind my own flour. Like, turns out he's not even reacting to all that stuff anymore, right? Like, and it's so tricky because I know that when you restrict those foods, it makes your skin not seem to flare. And what I find is the more restrictive someone's been for a while, the deeper hole that we dig, because what happens is the bottom line is like, if you're having a skin reaction from foods, I will bet my children on the fact that you are not digesting well. And if you are not digesting well, then restricting further is going to make you more depleted. And when you become more depleted, now you are going to end up with more issues. And so you have all these systems in your body, and they require workers. And the workers are nutrients. And when you are already unable to digest and absorb, and by the way, you don't have, until you become pretty damn aware of this, darn aware of this, Nikki, it's like you cannot really tell overall. So I should probably tell you about those types. Let me just jump in real quick, because I want to make a point that I think is sort of right along the lines with this, and just a little bit of a piggyback, because I'm sure that you see it a lot, and I see it a lot, where people come, the first thing they want is a food sensitivity test. Well, that's where my life started, and actually my story did go there next. I just kind of forgot about that part of it. I actually made myself much worse with it. And by the way, in the essence of 50-50, honestly, that work was helpful to me in practice and to my clients at the time when I used it. But not everyone is a good candidate for one, first of all, and the negative, that's a whole episode, I think, on its own, but there's like a lot of nuance on types, how to do it properly, and I just skip over that like all the time now. There's a couple indications where maybe it could be useful, but I will say, like, at the time because that's where I started, because just as a dietitian, I also was like, food is the answer to things, right? Always at first. And so funny enough that you say that when I had this big health crisis, I had recently gotten a dietitian certification on food sensitivity testing, and so just like every other human, I was excited to take this test, right? Because we're all like also excited about something that can give us the answer to something, and then we're annoyed when it doesn't give us the answer that we're looking for, because that's very normal and human. So no problem with that. I'm just I love to point out our humanity along the way, because it's kind of important for us to become more aware of it. And so anyway, I did that test, and while my clients were getting fine results with that, it was because of the type of eczema I had, is the short answer of like why this wasn't very helpful. But when you go into that process of restriction without a plan, you are generally under eating. And so, like, for example, one day I was rummaging through the pantry looking for something on my approved list, because I did not have a good plan. I wasn't making the plan like I was for my clients, right? And it was very early on in this process. So I did the test, I shelved it, which is a bad idea because it's very transient depending on what's going on in the immune system. I restricted the food, and I actually made myself worse. So I'm rummaging around in the pantry, and I'm eating a handful of pecans, and my eye starts to swell like moments later. And I'm like, what is going on? I've never had a food allergy in my life. I've never had a reaction to like this in my life. I'd actually created more stress, which equals inflammation in my body, by under eating and restricting the food in my body. So, if it's helpful to you, great, but I think there's no problem at all with like changing your diet for a few weeks and generally having a really healthy whole food diet. All of those are wonderful premises. But if you're over restricting an already depleted system, you're not helping anything. So
totally agree.
All the bad experiences.
So I just wanted to make sure. I wanted to make sure that we hit on that, just because it's the thing that people know. What am I allergic to? Or if they take it a step further, what am I sensitive to, and what's creating this issue? Different. And so, very different. Yes,
very different.
But then there's what I try to teach is there's the deeper levels. You still have to ask why. You always have to ask why and go deeper. So anyway, I didn't mean to sidetrack you from the assessment.
No problem.
So I'm excited to hear what you have to say about that. But I think I thought it was an important point. Yeah.
So something that happens, and I think we all have our strengths, and a strength of mine is pattern recognition. And so I very quickly noticed patterns with how your skin is responding and what it's reacting to, based on like what needs to be supported overall first. And so this is just normally I think about it kind of like layers of a cake, Nikki. It's like the bottom.
Hold on. I just lost your audio. Is that us, Henry?
It's coming back on.
Is it coming back on? Okay, try now.
All right, yeah.
Oh, okay, all right. Back up just
perfect.
A little bit.
Yeah, perfect, no problem. I was thinking about the eczema types, or we can call it atopic dermatitis. I find like everything I'm talking about does generally, or like how we do interventions does also apply to some other kind of rogue skin conditions as well. There's like HA, hidradenitis suppurativa, GA, granuloma annulare, like this will work for all of those things as well. But generally, because as you were talking about commonnesses earlier, I think it's like, this is kind of old data actually. I think it was 1 in 5 kids and 1 in 10 adults have eczema overall, but I think people have transient rashes too. Like I didn't really necessarily have a diagnosis, or I didn't think about it when I had that kind of dry skin that would show up in the winter. Okay, so I have 3 types or patterns that emerge that help kind of point us to first steps. And so that's why the first thing that we must do is assessment. And you're right, testing can be part of assessment. I use a lot of symptoms as assessment because testing is like a coin flip. and the symptoms as assessment always point to supporting systems, and signals in general, right, are your body's trying to tell you something, and your body has all of these machines going on. I'm just kind of reiterating some things. And so if we support this machinery to work really well, I'm going to say that I view this as a fact, but there's a lot of imbalance in those systems, right? Like sometimes some workers don't show up to work and then that system has to kind of compensate. We do a lot of compensating in our body. Many examples of that. And so I think that things don't always run beautifully, optimally, and a lot of times they may not run optimally and they may show symptoms or signals. And things have to be sort of really broken before they'll show up on a test. But it depends on the test. Like, I mean, that was a pretty broad statement, but especially blood testing, things have to be pretty screwy to usually show up on a test. Not always, because of course there's a ton of nuance to that, but in general, things have to be pretty screwy, which is why people go in and they don't always feel good, like themselves, have good, robust energy, and the tests come back like the simple, I always joke, it's like $3 a blood test that you were probably charged hundreds of dollars for to the insurance. It's just sort of a joke because you can go order them on your own for like $3 to $10. They will often be normal. Those particular tests are meant to show you if you're dying, so that makes sense. They would generally show up normally, right? And I don't mean to, I'm kind of poking fun on purpose because this is extremely common, and so therefore you and I spend a lot of time in education, right, around helping people just be good stewards of their body, their money, etc. Okay, back to the types. So the patterns that emerged are the most common, most basic one, especially like if you're 5 and under, this is usually the most prevalent type, is what I call the inflammatory type, very gut mediated. That is going to look, now you don't have to say yes to all of these, but, and I'm doing this off the top of my head, but it's going to be red and rashy. I know it sounds so unique, red and rash, but sometimes it's like more dry. It's going to be more red and rashy in certain spots, especially if it's round and spotted. It's usually this type. It's so characteristic. It's usually in the elbows, behind the knees, and just some things that are going to make it, like the way it may behave is it may look better. It may look better in the morning. And worse in the evening. Very, very, very common. It probably looks worse after like heat, physical activity, or like bath or shower in general. All of that is consistent with that inflammatory type eczema. There's a lot of histamine drivers, and histamine, just like food, is not a real root cause. It's a secondary root cause because histamine is a natural chemical neurotransmitter that your body should metabolize and excrete. But if there is imbalance or dysfunction in a system that would help it break down and excrete, then it's going to get stuck, and then you're going to have histamine-like symptoms. We're generally familiar with histamine-like symptoms from allergy-type symptoms, but also inability to kind of control temperature, and hives, and red and raised skin. All of those are symptoms of histamine stuff in general. And people may see, and I would say that's like, those are some of the most common food reactions that do sort of relieve insult to injury, is like really high histamine stuff. So essentially, like, think about going to a wine bar that is like just a board of histamine, essentially, right? It's like aged and meats and dairy, etc. And again, like, I love all of those things, but if you already have a congestion or a jam up of histamine, it's going to usually make it look worse. And so that is one area where I'm like, for most people, that's kind of like the big lever on food. I'm not saying, again, I hope you hear what I say when I say it is not like the root of the root. You can improve how it works, but it can get jammed up. And for women, it can get jammed up with ovulation, menstruation. I always say, I feel like I have an answer for all the things. So when people say, oh, it just randomly flares, I'm like, I bet it's not random. I bet it like is following a pattern, or we could easily find the pattern for it. So that's the first layer of the cake. So very common, and a lot of people start out with this particular layer, and then the longer, a very common common thing I see is that people maybe had eczema when they were a kiddo and then grew out of it and then got it and again as an adult, and then you get to add a new layer. And it's not always like that, of course, but in this, we're onto the layer that is my type. And so this type is more of like the dry and scaly type. And so it's usually going to look worse in the winter, whereas the other type may look worse in the summer, which is why when I had my crisis at the pool, it was almost a little bit uncharacteristic and sort of weird for me. And there's some reasons, right, that could have been. But in general, it's usually worse in the winter. Lots of reasons for that. It's generally more consistent with like that dry flakiness. Now people will say like, oh, my red spot is still dry and flaky. That's part of the skin healing process. It will flake as the skin actually heals. I'm talking about like systemically, you're kind of dry and flaky. I mean, like, I'm more totally dry and flaky overall. And the other thing is, you may say, I have sensitive skin, or you may have already, all of your personal care products may not have fragrances because one, you're either sensitive to fragrances, or you've like had some little minor reactions to like certain personal care products or things over the years. For me, it was like Band-Aids. I was allergic to the adhesives, things like that. Or you really don't like walking. I mean, who does like walking down the laundry aisle in a grocery store? But those smells might be kind of nauseating in general. All of those would be really consistent with what I would call the environmental type of eczema, and that tends to be like you have a lot of congestion in those elimination pathways overall, and so there's a lot of science on why you start to present dry, etc. But it's okay, you can have 2 layers of a cake. You don't have to just have 1 layer of a cake. The reason that this is kind of important is that first layer of a cake. When you only have that layer, I would say like you can see really substantial progress in a few weeks. You can like maybe be cleared in a few weeks, and if you have that next layer, you probably need to add a month on to that, to be honest. And I'm talking, this is very efficient, because efficiency is a core value of mine. So anyway, I love it. So that second layer is just going to add a little bit more depth. Like I need to do a little more work. I have a little bit more systems that need support overall. Okay. Now the third layer, and it's so nice, simplified into 3 buckets, right? The third layer is extremely common in the last 5 to 6 years after that little virus was walking around. There's like an increased stress overall, and so people would like the hallmark of this one to me is like hand eczema. And so hand eczema I almost always categorize in this group, but usually these people, they may have never had a skin rash in their life, and they have one. Like they're like, I don't know what happened, but now my hands are breaking out, or I got this going on, or whatever. Typically, this particular type happens after a notably stressful time in life overall. So I just intelligently, uniquely, creatively call it the stress subtype of skin issues. And so this looks like, again, it's very characteristic of eczema. Usually you had more stress right before this presents, and then generally you're going to be an extremely hypersensitive person. Like you might say, I'm reacting to everything, right? Like you can't take anything, like you just end up, and this person, the reason this one is important, and this is probably the most important part, if you start in the wrong place with this person, probably everything gets worse for them. And this is very, very common. This actually had to be, I would say, like we really need to up our ante around this over the last 6 years. Which people know, like in general, that people have changed in the last 6 years, but we have more big reactions to histamine, etc., more hypersensitivities. Like it was essentially a big hit to the, it was a very significant inflammatory hit to the body. And so when we were just sort of getting by, those systems that were a little bit underworked before were getting by. When you had inflammation, it just simply uses up a lot of workers. It uses up a ton of nutrients. And then what was sort of getting by before now really can't get by. And it's got to show up somehow, essentially. And so with those people, you really have to start by supporting all the stress hormone chemistry first. If you go into elimination or something, they're generally like a very depleted person typically. And so they're kind of like, hanging on by a thread in some respect. I make it sound terrible. I'm just, describing it how I see it. They're really, they're high functioning, barely functioning type thing where they're like, they don't have to, like they're, so that would be the stress subtype, and I think it's just so important that we start in the right place with them, because if we're not supporting calming their stress chemistry and putting out those inflammatory fires, nothing is helpful in that case overall. So that's that's one of the most important distinctions to make, in my opinion, around this. And so that helps me sort of focus on what systems to go after or support first, and how long might it take overall. Like how many systems are really super damaged, how many need support, because different systems, not shockingly, Nikki, right? Just going back to physiology class, require different support, different nutrients, etc. Which is why I think that we're doing ourselves a disservice when we don't sort of see how these things are behaving and acting. Because if we try to assign this sort of, I mean, to be honest, it kind of reminds me, I don't necessarily have a problem with peptides, but when we try to give a blanket approach to something without really paying attention to like what's going on in the body, for some people it's going to be great, for some people it's going to be like a total nightmare, right? And so that's sort of the approach we have with skin issues, is like we sort of have like a one-size-fits-all toolbox, and if we listen a little bit more closely to the symptoms, and we actually kind of start to understand what those symptoms mean and how they present, then we can support a system that needs more support first, right? Like which one is the real bleeding arm, and what can we support first? And when we support the right thing, the thing that is most struggling first, we're going to get faster results. And so I think this is largely why it's like, you know, if you go take this person with the stress subtype and you go put them on an elimination diet, and they probably already have done that, to be honest, it's like not helpful for them at all.
And it's so much more stressful.
Yeah, it's so much more and that actually is such an important point. It's like things that induce more stress are almost always contraindicated. Like they're almost always going to make things worse, which is why we have to kind of manage all the pieces of what's going on, and we sort of have to meet the person in front of us where they are to an extent as well.
So I want to talk a little bit more about that, because I feel like the stress component, the nervous system component, is always the hardest part, because it's not the stuff that we think about. And you know, what I see, and the way that I used to be, right? You know, I would see stress as, well, stress is financial stress, stress is relational stress, right? I think that it's important that we have an understanding that stress is internal, physically, mentally, emotionally, right? So stress is inflammatory no matter where it's coming from. And it's going to push it. And so stress can be from our traumatic experiences as a child. You know, we can have these stressors. And so when you're working with people who are this stress subtype, what is it that how are you helping them? What are little tricks of the trade?
Yeah, so the easiest way to think about this is the health triad. Like, how could I do something from the nutritional chemical perspective? How could I do something maybe from the structural perspective? And how could I do something from the emotional energetic perspective? So that's how I'll answer that question. From the nutritional chemical perspective, I'm supporting the stress hormone network, which would be adrenals, thyroid, etc. And when you support that with targeted nutrients, it's like helps them literally function again in a short amount of time, which is super helpful. They'll kick themselves in the butt by overworking, you know, overdoing something. It's like, and I'm talking about myself as well. Like I'm not talking about someone outside of myself. Like that was my second health crisis, which doesn't really matter. But it was like I was working for a fasting program, which is cute because you can end up under eating really quickly, so I crash my stress hormones. And so I've been there. I understand what I'm talking about. When I'm poking fun, I'm poking fun at myself too. Anyway, the structural component, if there is a broken skin barrier, super hard to do any healing from the inside out. So we want to like do as much as we can to heal that skin barrier, especially because I talked about that stress subtype with hands. This is a very hard place to have your skin broken open, is on your hands, because you need to use them all day long. And then the last part is the emotional energetic piece. Ever since I added, so I spent probably like over a year testing different nervous system modalities. And the reality is there's a whole bunch of options. I like a couple of things that were really helpful for my nervous system. And so I do those types of sessions with clients. There's a type of coaching, and then there's a kind of breath work. So a somatic option, and then like a coaching option to kind of manage our mind. So not just mindset work, but like literally taking what's like taking up the space in their brain, which is impacting their overall healing. And these are things that very often people don't think that they need. And when they engage with them, they're like, oh my gosh, this was the life-changing part. You'll see that in a lot of things, but that's the tricky part when you get kind of good at your job, right, Nikki? Is like the better you get at it, the more you realize, well, we don't know what we thought we knew, right? Or in my experience trying to do all the nutrition stuff, I'm like, oh, this isn't enough. This isn't enough,
right.
you know, to help prevent relapse, etc.
Yeah.
And so I started doing more, but helping people arrive at that as well. And hopefully this will help us, you know. And just a very good example of this, I have this whole training on like my step-by-step process. And I just redid it last week. And I took out a part. I was doing a little breathwork exercise in it. And I didn't catch this earlier, but like there's a lot of data on like when do people quit watching, and a lot of people quit watching right at that part. Actually, like they just skip the last like 25% at that point. And I mean whatever, actions speak louder than words, so I'll take that for what it is. But it's sort of like I wanted to include that initially. I did take it out now just to shorten things up to make it easier for people to get through that, but. I really wanted to include that initially because I wanted people to step into my world that like valued that stuff, that valued the nervous system stuff. And I was successful at that. I definitely did end up with clients who did value it, because it's like when people value it, when people can get their mind around it or value it, or, you know, I love when people say, I didn't know I needed this, but I just showed up once and I was like, whoa, that was really transformational. And that's the thing, like some things are experiential. And I don't remember what your initial question was. It was really, how do you help those people? But for me, ever since I started adding this nervous system stuff, which was about 1.5 years ago, where I was doing it really regular, like it was built in all the time. Oh my gosh, it has made like leaps and bounds better results on my stress, my client stress. Like it's so nice. It's just a matter of what the tricky part is helping people get out of their own dang way, because there's a reason we have ended up where we are. And I always kind of joke, I started facilitating this type of somatic practice sort of accidentally, because I got tricked into it doing it at an entrepreneur conference, and I was like, wow, I was really epic. So, you know, I would not have necessarily slowed down to do that. And so that's the tricky thing, is that we're motivated by usually inspiration or desperation. At that point, I think it was more inspiration, but it's typically desperation. And so the longer I do this, I'm like, oh, this is like the really good stuff, actually, right? I know you think you want all these nutrition questions answered. What I find very often is people like talk out of, like, when they ask a question, I have to really discern. I was like, oh, that's actually not a nutrition question. You just it's actually an emotion question that you're asking about. So let me put the right hat on and help you with the answer.
It's a great point, and I think this is from my own experience. You know, I have been seeing someone who does somatic work, and that's not my specialty. And what I know about myself, and what I think I know about probably most people, is it's the hard part, because you have to make yourself be still. You can't go and do all of these other things and multitask, and it's literally sitting still and doing inward work that's hard for people to do.
Oh yeah. And if you're struggling with it, it's a call that you need it more. And I'm not different than any of the people that struggle to sit, which is why I like this type of breathwork, because for a person who can't calm their mind, it's perfectly distracting. It's like, oh well, you're being led to do specific things, not sit in silence. You know, but you're still getting the action. So I mean, just to differentiate, if someone tried meditation and they struggled with it, it's okay. You got other options to improve your nervous system. There's all kinds of options. And, you know, it's like that. I hope you can look at it as a good thing. That's one of my mantras, is like, you always have options.
Yeah. Well, it's true. It's very true. So let's dig into, I'm so torn. I mean, they're kind of connected. So we've got gut-skin axis, so we've got hormones, we've got the estrobolome, you know, we've got all of these things but everything is so connected anyway. We have all of these axes. So I think that maybe we do this. Let's look at hormones, because one of the things that you stated earlier is when especially women, right, because we're so cyclical, we can see, even if we don't realize it, we can start to, like you said, put patterns together and start to understand when things are happening. So what are you doing with people who are sort of this, I don't know if you want to call it hormonal and or estrobolomal, for making up a new word. So what are you seeing with I would say women like that, and maybe some men, but women like that.
Yeah, I would say we don't need to overcomplicate this. We can actually oversimplify it. And something I don't think we want to, I think we want to start with the awareness and assessment part of it before we talk about the what to do with it, because just this week I was talking to a client about a symptom, and I looked at like the history and the data. I was like, well, it looks like it's happening around your period. And she's a very smart person who's already worked and with several other clinicians. She's like, oh, I guess it is happening like that. And so I say that because you can be very smart, but if you're not kind of like writing that down, it'd be really easy to miss, to be honest. You might just think like, oh, it just randomly shows up. I'm like, it probably is not random, actually. We just have to like find the patterns.
Right.
So what's happening in the body, specifically for menstruating women, and especially in perimenopausal, because that's called second puberty, there's actually a rise in estrogen. So every month you're going to have a little bit of a steady roller coaster. I'll use the word roller coaster, that's fine. A steady, like a little bit of a rolling hill, and then a decline, and a little bit more of a hill and a decline. More of the steeper hill is the more beginning to the middle of the month, like when you're ovulating. More of the rolling hill, the second part of the month. And so what will happen is you may see any kind of, it could be acne or any kind of skin flare. You can see that for me. It was if I'm drinking coffee. This actually happened for a while, and I just needed to support the system. But I'll tell this one as well. When I would drink espresso, my heart would start racing, but only the week of my period. Right?
Oh,
so,
fascinating.
So that, like, what was happening was kind of, I would say probably right after ovulation and sort of right before your menstrual cycle, your body is clearing excess hormone, would be this simple. I'm going to oversimplify in general. I think that'll work best. So your body's going to clear excess hormones after the peak. What goes up must come down, I guess. And so after it sort of rises, it must fall. And where's it going to go? Like, it's circulating, but your body also clears it out. It wraps it up in a little package, and it eliminates it through our processes of elimination. Usually poops it out. And so there are lots of things that can go wrong in that process. So many things that can go wrong in that process, and we can talk about some of those things, but just to stay on the right track here, because there's several places where that process could generally get interrupted. Literally, if you have, as you probably all know, if you've ever menstruated, if you have a stressful month, you could have a screwy period. Like, even stress can completely, it impacts the COMT pathway. So there are many places that this can get interrupted, and in general, you'll find histamine goes through some of these same pathways. And so if you already have histamine jammed up, and then you need to clear out excess sex hormone, then you're going to probably see your body throw that on your skin, or you're going to see more skin flares around ovulation or around menstruation. I mean, your opinion about this is the problem first. It's like, this isn't the end of the world. It's just data. It's like, oh, well, that's a neutral thing. It's just like, what does that mean? It's like, oh, well, there's a freeway jam. No problem. It's like, let's try to improve the flow of the freeway next month, right? And there's lots of options to improve that. It depends on where it's getting stuck overall. But I think, it's easy for me to be like, oh, we can make that really have a complicated conversation, but it's like, why don't we just oversimplify it? It's all the same stuff I'm already talking about, which is how your body is clearing stuff, and when it cannot clear stuff, it throws it on the skin. The end.
So makes perfect sense. I love it. So are you seeing, or how often do you see, and I don't know if this is something that you test for, because we kind of already have talked about testing, but as far as like infection is concerned, dysbiosis, that kind of thing, what are you seeing with those patients, clients?
Well, that's a broad question. In general, my opinion is that there's imbalance in all the systems overall. And if you have the inflammatory subtype of skin stuff, there's usually some kind of low-grade infection. The issue with testing is if you put all your baskets in the testing bucket, and depending on who interprets the test and who provides the protocol for the test and what the test was and what happened that day and what happened leading up to that week, those are all factors that may skew what happens on that test. So I want to put that caveat in there. But for 10 years, I saw overgrowth of staph and strep all the time. On stool tests, we see a crap ton of H. pylori, which I hate to even say that out loud because the way we test for that medically, it's like super unsensitive. So it actually gets missed constantly. And that gets passed around a lot. And there's plenty of evidence to say that that's related to different types of skin rashes. For me, it's not. I'm like very focused on results, so I don't get too wrapped up sometimes in the actual diagnosis. Like someone might come in and say, I have this, and I was like, cool. I'm glad that like you have a diagnosis. Now what are you going to do with it, right? And so it's like, what are the other things that are going on with it? So I think your question was like, what do I do around infections? There's a fairly reasonable assumption that there is something going on, is my lived experience with clients. And so improving balance of the microbiome in general is, I think, a core tenet of what should be done.
Sure. Yeah, it's one of those things that I collaborate with a couple of different practitioners and physicians, and it's this they're going this direction. I'm like, okay, we got to support the microbiome. We can do this over here. We got to support the microbiome because most everybody does not have a robust microbiome at this point. They're not getting enough fiber and they're not supporting the proper bugs. So just curious what your thoughts were on that, because I think it's such a key component.
Yeah, I mean, I did stool testing on everyone for 10 years. Last year I decided, sometimes you ask yourself new questions like, how can we get these results faster? Do I need this? And so I don't ever restrict testing, but now, it used to be that people would come to me from their doctor, their medical doctor, and now people come to me from 3 other or 4 other types of practitioners, and they may have already spent a bunch of money on a test, and what I find is people are okay with not spending more money on a test and just getting to work on segmenting those symptoms and starting to support that system overall. And I've been testing this and evaluating the data really diligently for 2 years, and it's working impeccably well.
Nice. Very good. So we are running out of time, but I want to talk a little bit. I don't think that we hit it very deep, but kids. We see kids who are struggling with this all the time, and so parents get frustrated. Kids are tough because, right? It's kids don't want to change. They don't know what's going on. They may not even care, right? I mean, and so
what I hear, that's a lot of opinions, but I think like you could segment that and say, I always say like 5 and under is pretty easy because they'll usually listen to their parents and like do what their parents want typically, and like 6 to 25 is a whole different ballgame, and that includes everything you just said. Everything you just said. So everyone's like trying to fix their kid. I mean, I get it. I'm trying to help my 21-year-old and 13-and-a-half-year-old, and I'm really struggling with my 13-and-a-half-year-old because she's like kind of non-compliant. But the thing is like I can't do the thing for her that she needs to do to help herself, and so I sort of have to let her be motivated. Motivated is I have to let her be desperate enough where she'll be compliant, and so she ebbs and flows. And as a parent, I try to be supportive overall. But I always have that, like, that's a conversation I would have with lots of parents. First of all, when you're working with a parent of a child, you're working with the parent's nervous system, so now you have 2 clients. A lot of people will not even work with children. I like 5 and under because it's just straightforward. It's like, well, we're not dealing with personalities, so much as, not that kids 5 and under doesn't have personalities, but they're going to kind of do what their mom or dad wants more than the kids are older. And then if they're sort of a preteen teen, I think that it's really important to have body positivity around everything that we're doing, right? And like, oh, we're trying to support our body type thing. So that is tricky because that's, as you know and I know, that's not always, people don't always, they didn't even get those skills in the first place to kind of be cognizant or aware of that. And so, anyway, back with kids in general, like I always think with everyone, like start with your low-hanging fruit, because a lot of people will have skin rashes, but if they do clean up their environment, things can improve. Like you are cleaning up your personal care products, your detergent, like I expect all of that stuff is usually a lot better before someone ever gets to me, right? Like those are like sort of basic 101 things from that structural environmental thing. So do all of those things because it may make a difference, and it's up to everyone's individual preference on like how much they want to invest around something. It's like we can all say like, oh, I want to fix this thing, And the next question is, do you want to do the work that it takes to fix the thing properly?
Yeah.
You know?
Yeah.
And so I would say, like, start with your low-hanging fruit. Like, you have options. Remember that conversation we had where it's like, you always have options. So you can always start with something, right? Yeah. But that's the tricky. When I have friends like, oh, my kid's stomach hurts. And I'm like, that could go a lot of directions.
Yeah.
Like, and one of the toxic things about me is I'd like to tell you all the directions it could go, but I have to shut my mouth sometimes. It's like, I don't know if you're ready. And that's the tricky part, unfortunately, for us as humans, is sometimes we do have to, like, have some bad experiences with the simple options or the things we tried first before we're like, you know, apparently I need to do this a different way.
Yeah.
And I'm like I am a root of the rip person, right? I'm like, oh yeah, let's get like everything working properly, because once you've been doing things for a while, you're like, well, if we don't improve how everything is working, we're just going to end up, you know, it's just like kind of halfway doing it.
Yeah.
And my opinion is like, I don't really like halfway doing it. I'd rather just not do it at all if I have to halfway do it at the end.
Yeah. Right. I love it. Well, this has been awesome. Thank you so much for all of this. Where can people find you?
Yeah, you can just find me at my website, which is christabiegler.com. And, you know, spelling that is a whole nother thing, but maybe it'll be in the show notes. It
will all be in the show notes, yes. So you can find her, I think in all the promo stuff, we already have your website and everything in there. But in this video, and then, of course, in all the podcasting, that kind of thing, all of Christa's information is going to be there. Wealth of knowledge and great information. Thank you for this. I love the way your brain works, putting patterns together. I think that's amazing. So really good stuff.
I hope that I get to use it like that for many more years.
Yeah. That's another practice, right? Taking care of our cognitive health.
Yes, for sure. So many things.
So many things. I know. All right, everybody. Check her out. She's got a lot of great information on her website. Really is doing a great job for people. So, of course, you can find me, Taste Life Nutrition, the website, all of the places. Check out your Precision Wellness Blueprint. My area of nerddom is epigenetics and nutrigenomics, and I just love that piece of it. I think it's so fascinating and gives us a lot of power in our health and in our future. So. We'll always happy to dig into that with you. So, we will see you again 10 a.m. Mountain Time, streaming live on kuhsdenver.com, 10 a.m. I think I already said that. We'll see you next week. Stick with me here in just a second. Everybody, feel free to reach out if there's anything that I can do to be of service. We'll see you later. Bye.